question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure to rise and speak on behalf of the Labour Party on the social assistance portability to Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau bill, which we will be supporting at first reading to select committee. Mr. Speaker, before I address the content of this bill, I'd like to take the opportunity to dedicate my first reading speech to some recently departed leaders of high standing from the Hamilton community in both the Cook Islands and the Niuean community. George Ford and Terry Chapman, both Tonga and leaders in the Hamilton community for their respective Cook Islands and Niuean communities, actually, interestingly, died within a few days of each other, about a year ago. And it was a time of great loss and great grief for not only their communities in Hamilton, but the broader community in Hamilton, because of the leadership roles that those two men had displayed in terms of the integration of their communities with the broader Hamilton community, and in ensuring that people who were coming to Hamilton from the Cook Islands and from Niue, that they had a community to settle into, that they were well looked after, and that benefited the rest of the community. Mr. Speaker, I raise this because isn't it interesting that when you know people in your community, sometimes you don't always know what a contribution they have made, and it wasn't until I attended Terry Chapman's funeral that I learnt and understood the amazing contribution that he had made to Niue, because he had been the primary public servant involved in drafting the Niuean Constitution. And he had come to live and work in New Zealand after having that incredible commitment and impact on his own country. And it wasn't until I was at his funeral and, thank you, I saw that the Premier of Niue had travelled to Hamilton to farewell Terry Chapman, that I truly understood what this man's contribution had been. And of course that contribution, because of the connection between, as the Minister has just said, between Niue and New Zealand, is considerable for our own community because of the way in which that constitution was brought about. So, Mr. Speaker, I do want to dedicate my first reading speech to those two very fine gentlemen who have made such a contribution to their own nations, but also to the nation building in New Zealand and to our Hamilton community in particular. This bill is supported by the Labour Party because it helps people. And as people know about the Labour Party, our view is that people matter most. And so that this bill gives effect to portability of New Zealand superannuation and the veterans' pension to people who may wish to retire in the Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau seems like a very correct and fitting thing to be doing. What a nice place to retire. Any of those places, wouldn't they be fabulous? Perhaps thinking about, you know, if in our older age, if we didn't need, perhaps if we were fit enough, we didn't feel that we needed to be near a tertiary hospital or major healthcare services, any of those places would be fabulous places to retire. And this bill allows people to have that option. So it allows that portability. The aim of it is to allow eligible people who live in the Cook Islands, Niue or Tokelau to be able to apply from either of those countries for New Zealand superannuation or a veteran's pension, and to be paid those benefits in either of those countries or in other specified Pacific countries. This policy from the government was announced on the 9th of August 2013 by the Honourable Murray McCully, and it's taken some time to get to a first reading, but I'm pleased that it has made it onto the order paper at this point in time. So under the current rules, I think as the Minister outlined, people wishing to retire to the Cook Islands, Niue or Tokelau have to be resident and present in New Zealand at age 65. Well, they could be the president as well, but no, they're not required to be the president. They're only required to be present, so it's not so cumbersome. So as we know, these are our Pacific neighbours. So the people who are most likely to be using this, Mr. Speaker, probably are not people like myself who think it would be a wonderful dream to retire in such a location. Very likely to be people who are returning home. People who have come to our country, come to New Zealand to contribute to our society, to further their own education perhaps, or to further the opportunities afforded to their own families. They have worked, they have given a huge commitment, and the sort of contribution that I just outlined before from the two gentlemen I spoke of, Terry Chapman and George Ford, huge commitment and skills that they have brought to our country. And then, after having earned money here, have earned the right to be paid New Zealand superannuation, they have then earned the right to be able to go retire in their homeland. And I think that that's right and proper that we afford them that ability to do so. So residents of those countries and that territory would still, as the Minister outlined before, Tokelau is regarded as a territory, they would still need to qualify for New Zealand superannuation in the first instance. So they must have been resident and present in New Zealand for more than 10 years since the age of 20, including 5 years since the age of 50 for this new provision to apply to them. So this means that people who are entitled to New Zealand superannuation, regardless of whether they are of Cook Island, Niuean or Tokelauan ethnicity, will be able to depart New Zealand to live in one of these three countries after the age of 55 and apply without returning to New Zealand for their super once they turn 65. Mr. Speaker, one thing that I do notice is that and I suppose it's more noticeable now because we have this tool that we use called Facebook where we can see what people are up to. And I do notice that people from the Cook Islands and Niue and Tokelau from the Hamilton area are actually going back and rediscovering their roots. And for some of these families, they have not, they don't, it's the, I guess the children of the people who first travelled here. And so they're going back and reconnecting with their parents and sometimes their grandparents' villages and rediscovering those roots for the first time. And Mr. Speaker, what I notice, and I guess I had a little bit of a experience like this myself, is that when people go back and discover their roots, how much confidence it gives them in who they are and where they have come from. And you can absolutely notice that when people return, they've got that newfound sense of confidence. And I had a little bit of an experience like this myself. When I went and did my overseas experience, I think I was at the tender age of 18 or 19 at the time, I went to this foreign land called Ireland. Place I'd never been to before, place I didn't know a lot about, but I have Irish ancestry on both sides of my family. That probably explains a little bit to my colleagues about me, but I have Irish ancestry on both sides, so there is no escaping it. What I really was not prepared for was landing in this foreign land I had never been to before and feeling completely and utterly at home from day one. And I imagine that that's something of the experience that people who are going back and discovering their roots in these three localities have as well. That somehow, through the DNA, I think it actually is transmitted that this is home, that this is where you belong. And so the calling will be strong for people from those three locations to retire there. This bill allows them to do that without losing the financial support that they have earned and they have gained from their time in New Zealand. It's a bill that is worthy of our support. I'm very proud to have stood and supported this bill on behalf of the Labour Party, and particularly in memory of those two fine men, George Ford and Terry Chapman. Thank you.